hope you're doing well. My name is Anahita Sen, and I'm a co-facilitator of the M&A Stories YouTube podcast, which is brought to you by Fifth Chrome Business Insights. Welcome to Season 3. The theme of this season is culture and its impact on M&A integration. Culture is one of the biggest challenges that face an M&A integration, and this challenge couldn't get any bigger as more companies are pursuing M&A based on people and culture. That is why it is important to understand, internalize, respect, and develop a clear plan of action on how to handle culture in M&A. In this season, we will be interviewing industry leaders from across the globe to hear their stories on how they address culture in an M&A integration. So here we go with today's episode.
Hi there, welcome to another episode of M&A Stories. As you know, our theme of this season is culture. And we are proud to bring in yet another very experienced, very talented guest who is going to talk about culture in M&A integration. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Lynette Buitt. Lynette, so good to see you again after so many years, I guess.
Yes, it has been a lot of years. It's so good to see you as well. I'm so glad we get to actually see each other.
Exactly.
We're not the same room, but we'll take it. We'll take it.
Yeah, no, I mean, COVID has been tough on many of us, but thankfully, we have been able to get over the tough period. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. My goodness, thank you for having me.
I mean, with the kind of knowledge and experience you have, this is going to be a blast. I can absolutely assure our audience. So let's start with a brief introduction, Lynette.
Okay. All right. So my name is Lynette Buitt. I'm based out of the state of Tennessee in the United States. Just got here about 7 months ago, so I'm a brand new member, so to speak. And I have actually been doing this type of work for 13 years. I've been in HR for probably about 17 years, but I've been doing HR M&A for 13 of those 17 years. I kind of raised my hand to do deals because it looked interesting in 2010. So I kind of like to say that I fell into doing it. And I've been doing it ever since. And I love it. And I love talking about all things, HR M&A, including culture. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thankfully, you made that decision and took the leap of faith, because otherwise M&A would be so much poorer, right?
Well, that's a very nice thing to say. Yes. Well, and the good part is, I took that leap of faith. I kind of fell into it, if you will, and I did it internally for about 6 years, and I've been doing it on my own for about, a little over 5 years, and then just recently joined with a partner of mine to create a company to kind of continue what I have started and bring him in so we can have kind of, two heads are better than one, because he's been doing HR M&A for the same amount of time that I have. So I'm really excited. It's just kind of an exciting year all the way around, and we're just very excited to be part of. We've got a fun little company named People First M&A Partners, and we just joined forces this summer, so it's exciting times.
I love that name, People First. In fact, there's this friend of mine. He's actually written a book called People First. His name is Hutton Henry. He has been one of the guests, and I'm going to share his details with you later. And he's actually an M&A guy. They do a lot of technology due diligence. So this is hey Hutton, if you're listening in, this is a call out for you. But good to know that you have your soulmate on the other side of the Atlantic, right?
Yes.
So,
yes. No, that's wonderful. Thank you for, I didn't even realize that. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Cool. So let's walk back to the time that you started your journey in the M&A. And this is just painting a picture, of how your thinking evolved over the years, right? So what were some of the things that you saw, some of the things that you already knew, some of the things that you kind of learned in the first couple of years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because before I was in HR, I don't even know if I've ever shared this with you. I was actually a paralegal or a legal assistant, whatever you want to call it, in the United States for about 9 years.
Wow.
And I spent half of that time working in kind of labor and employment law, which is kind of what parlayed my interest into human resources. So then fast forward to 2010, where, I raised my hand to do HR M&A work. And what's interesting about that is my first deal was a multi-billion-dollar deal, which is, I think, very well, it feels a little rare.
Sure.
To have a deal be that large. It was we had like 3,000 employees. We were in 8 to 10 different countries. And so what was interesting about that, the way I kicked it off, was it was actually a bidder situation where we were divesting. It wasn't an acquisition, it was a divestiture or a carve out, really. And so we were divesting this business unit, and we basically had to put together materials to, sell the HR function and sell the people, if you will. I'm going to use the word
Sure.
sell a little loosely, but so that was my first experience. It was very interesting. It was not a formalized team. There were literally 3 of us. They had 50% of my time, and I got very ingratiated into what it meant to do the work, what the process looked like. Of course, it was a little bit different because it was a bidder situation, but I also got very involved in the employee data, and I got very involved in understanding how the integrity of the data, how it's kept in the United States versus outside the United States. And I would like to think of that as kind of like, I kind of think of my HR M&A career as a house that I've built, and that was the foundation. So I kind of started with the employee data, because then my second deal was working on the change management and communications, if you will, for an acquisition. So, and that was also global in nature. They were both global in nature, both of the deals. And so I got like these kind of small pieces that I started with and that I got to really own and make my own, and then took that and then went and worked on kind of a dedicated HR M&A team where I started to lead deals, whether it was, deals in the United States or deals globally. And so my first couple of years were just honestly a lot of learning, a lot of understanding the process, a lot of understanding the timing and the fast-paced nature of deals, and then also what it means from a data and technology perspective when you're thinking about how important the integrity of the employee data is to actually doing the deal in the right way for employees and ensuring that employees have kind of that seamless experience, if you will. That kind of, after my first couple of years, that meant everything and continues to mean everything to me, is to ensure employees have that experience. And I always kind of envision it as I do work behind the curtain, so to speak, and they don't need to know everything that I do. They just need to know that I'm going to try to make this kind of the best experience possible. But it was very interesting because the deals ranged in size, scale, and scope, candidly, from divestitures to acquisitions to a joint venture. I mean, you name it, I really got it in those first like 2 or 3 years.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Now let's talk about the theme of the season, right? So we're talking about M&A stories and we're talking about culture, and culture is very closely related to people. Yes. What's your take? Let's start with that.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of talk right now about culture, even outside the construct of M&A, right? But obviously there's a lot of talk about culture within the construct of M&A. And for me, culture is everything. And I will tell you that unequivocally, I haven't seen culture discussions happen a great deal at kind of that LOI or that letter of intent phase. I wish it would. I wish at least the conversations would start. But what I also see is a mix of whether HR is even involved. And candidly, HR is typically that voice of culture, right? And if you don't get that voice in the room and you don't have that voice asking the questions, then typically the conversation doesn't tend to happen. So, but it's a mix, right? Some companies are very, very good about bringing HR in really early, and some don't tend to do that. And so I would love to see it happen at LOI, but then candidly, what I actually do see happen is it starts once HR is brought in, they know about the deal, the diligence kind of officially kicks off, if you will. And then, that's kind of like, that's where kind of the flower opens, if you will, and you get to really learn about the organization and what their culture is and so on and so forth. And I have lots of thoughts about culture, so I'm happy to expand on them. But for me, culture is everything. And the earlier that we can have the conversations about who they are, what they do, how they operate, things of that nature, the better.
Sure. And you've actually said it nicely, which is some companies get it, but a large number don't. And in fact, the worst part is, and when we conducted our cultural research, what we found was universally, we interviewed more than 50 people. Universally, everybody acknowledged that culture is important.
Yep.
And universally, everybody said that nobody did any financial estimation, financial analysis around the impact of culture. And that was like really shocking. And obviously, I wouldn't name names who participated in that culture, but some of you who are watching it, you know who you are, right? But that's the reality. And not just that, some of the people also had highlighted, they say strategy discussions, they'll talk about culture. Oh, we need to get a good fit. As it evolves over a period of time, by the time it comes to the LOI stage or the deal screening and the target screening, right, the culture gets replaced with Excel spreadsheet, funnily enough, Excel comes from Microsoft, which is both cultural elements. But anyways, Excel, yeah, and then even though business leaders and CEOs would want to bring culture in, and they have all the right intent, but the entire effort and jockeying around numbers leave them kind of exhausted by the time they hit the change of ownership day one. And then it's like, okay, you know what? Let's give it to HR, or let's give it to somebody else to handle culture, right? And what we also find is that often enough, HR resources or HR managers or whoever is leading the integration is not empowered to be able to make those cultural changes. What's been your experience so far?
So what's funny about even the word empowered is I feel like it also depends on the culture of the buyer, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have a culture where they're not empowered just in their day to day,
yeah,
the deal isn't going to change that, right?
So
so if that's how the culture is, then that can act, obviously that is kind of a detriment or a deficit to the person coming in and doing the deal. I also think it matters so there's a couple of things. The first thing I think it matters is who's coming in the deal, like from HR. Is this a dedicated, is there a dedicated HR M&A team with dedicated HR due diligence and integration? That you could do both, folks that come in and as a part of their request list and as a part of their diligence, they're asking those questions, right? And they're making it a focus, because that's what's happening. It's not a focus. People get myopically focused on the numbers, which I totally understand. I get it. However, I don't think it has to be an or proposition. I think it could be an and proposition, right? You've got the numbers, and let's talk about the people. Let's talk about the culture. Let's talk about how they do business, because there's a reason. My thinking is there's always, obviously there's a reason that the buyer wants to buy the seller, right? There's a reason. Now, sometimes it may be, nothing to do with people. It could be a product. It could be, a technology, right? But most of the times, most of the deals I've worked on, I won't say all, but most of the deals I've worked on, there is always a people component. There's always a people component, whether it's, you need to retain whatever it is you're buying, and they're part of that retention, if that makes sense. Or you just need people around to do the work, right? You can't have everybody leave at close, or the value is gone. So for me, it's a yes and proposition. And it's a yes and proposition to give culture the priority and the focus that it deserves in diligence. I'm also a huge proponent of that. For me, it's not a wait till we sign or wait till we close. If you have the option to have, a gap in between, it is, you do it during diligence, and you do it in diligence every single time, candidly. And you make it a part of your diligence regime or approach, where, you kind of have the what, who, tell me what is the what for this company? What are their values? What's their mission statement? What is the org structure? How are decisions made within that org structure? And you do that, initially, as we both know, deals are confidential. So you do it with what you have. You do it with documents that they give you. You do it with, maybe you go to their website and take a look and see what they've got and kind of how it's structured. And, you have discussions with the people that are kind of under the tent for the deal. Now, typically, you and I both know that's going to be people at a higher level, typically the C-suite, maybe the C-suite -1, if you're lucky. But mostly it's kind of that C-suite. So you do your level best to get what you can from them. I actually, I did a deal that started in August where, and I asked the question because, we're doing on-sites, but we're not doing them where you actually, because I've actually done on-sites where you go to an office of the seller, right, of the target. Well, I haven't done one of those in many, many years. And so we're meeting with the target company, but, at a kind of a different location. And so I'll ask the question, so tell me what I see when I walk into headquarters. What do I see? What do I see on the wall? What do I see down the hallway? How are the offices set up? Like, are they in pods? Because if I walked in, I would observe things that are, do I see people collaborating? I would ask questions of the leaders. How is communication handled? What are the ways of working within the organization? This is just like a fraction of some of the questions that I ask, but for me, I need to just understand kind of the what and the who and kind of a little bit of the how, and, even like, how are people coming in and out of the organization? How do they reward their employees? So I think that it can be done. I think it's an and proposition, not an or proposition. And I think that if you're able to really give focus to it, that you'll reap the benefits. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, 100% agree with that statement. And in fact, I would go a step beyond, especially in the sort of current rapidly changing world of generative AI and all of that good stuff that's happening, right? People have become so important, talent have become so important in the equation. So unless you're like an asset heavy company where you have oil storage tankers or, chances are that you're going to be very people dependent, very people centric, talent centric, right? And that's where getting that feel of the pulse is extremely important. So good call out. But most companies don't get it, right? Most companies struggle with it. So let's talk about some of the symptoms, some of the challenges that you see when things have not been done properly.
Well, one of the things, you were speaking earlier, too, about some of the outputs of your research from the culture work that you did. And one of the things I was thinking that popped in my head was, I've been in organizations or been working with organizations where they'll say, we're going to take the best of both cultures. I'll tell you that I haven't actually, if someone has seen that work, I would love for them to reach out to me and tell me about it, because I want a good example. Like I actually want one, but I haven't seen something like that work, right? Not because it's not well intended. It's because what I believe is if you really don't do that kind of, I'm going to call it kind of a little bit more hardcore, rigorous, structured cultural due diligence in the beginning, then you don't really know what you're signing up for, because you don't really know what their cultures. I can't walk into those. Like I said, I walk into HQ, and I would start looking around. Those are just initial observations, right? That's initial data that I have, but that doesn't tell me anything. You need to spend a little time with them. You need to have conversations with them. You need to understand, why people stay, why people leave. You need to understand the true kind of full picture. And what I have seen happen is, and they're well intended, but leaders will come out and they'll say, oh, let's take the best of both. If that's truly the case, then for me, like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, let me take my outputs from diligence. Let me get a plan together. Let me put as much structure and rigor around this so I can get to that end state that really truly is a portrait of, maybe 50% seller, 50% buyer, whatever the, breakout is. But I feel like sometimes what I find happens is leaders will talk about culture in a way where it's just a piece of the picture. They've been given a piece of it. They haven't been given the whole thing. So when that happens, that makes me nervous. And I will tell you that has happened. It's made me nervous, and it's ended up in, integrations where honestly it doesn't happen. It was promised and it was vocalized and told to the employees, and then it didn't happen. And that's the worst thing.
Yeah.
If you say something that's not going to happen, that's terrible. To me, like that's one of the worst things you can do. Like give them, because when you're communicating with the employees, you want to give them as much data as you can with a balance of not trying to overwhelm them, but tell them the truth, right?
Sure.
Be as transparent. And I know it's well intended. I don't mean to imply that anybody's like intentionally not telling the truth. However, you got to be able to make statements that can be backed up. You know what I mean? That can actually come to fruition.
Sure.
And so that's one of the worst examples I can tell you unequivocally is if I have someone that gets up and says something that I can't either we don't have the time to make happen in the time that we have, or we don't have enough data to actually support that what they're saying is true.
Right.
Those are the worst scenarios. And it always has to do with cultures, and it always impacts the employee. And I will tell you, it's not a good scenario because people, they won't stick around for it.
Right.
They won't.
Right. No, absolutely. And in fact, often this is another sort of observation. People tend to treat culture in isolation compared to.
Tell me more what you mean.
Yeah. So there's a people angle, there's the leadership angle, and there's what we call the management operating system angle, right?
Yeah.
It's a reason why certain culture exists, because there are underlying structures and practices,
yes,
rituals and artifacts, right?
Yes.
Quite often, and I'd say culture is an outcome. Culture is a symptom. The way people behave is because there are underlying factors. It's almost like in school, right? When in primary school, kids are given structures so that they become they start in a certain way, right? The same thing happens with culture. And when I'd worked with General Electric for many years. When I started my career with General Electric, it was still Jack Welch's era, and I actually saw how he and his team went about changing the culture of the organization. They would put structures, practices, reinforce the ideas time and time again in order to change the culture.
Yes.
The same thing I saw in the initial years of Jeff Immelt, which is they would change structures, practices, the way you would do appraisals, the way you would, you would see or assess the interaction of people, the way communication gets done, etc., or got done back then. That defined the culture. And yet I see a lot of people, practitioners included, senior practitioners, they try to approach culture singularly, and again, probably because we have developed a framework for handling culture, so that's why we're probably more radicalized. But our belief is that culture is not an entity in itself, but is a result of underlying factors, practices, structures, people, leadership that drive it, right? If you want to change culture, you need to tweak the underlying layers, the structures and the practices. Now, quite often we see that people only talk about vision, mission, purpose.
Yes.
And then the other thing they talk about is empathy. So they get stuck on these things. And I said, okay, when was the last time that somebody told you about a company's vision and you remembered it? Right.
Exactly.
It needs to be repeated. It needs to be reinforced for vision to be meaningful, for mission to be meaningful, right? And yet organizations treat culture as a switch on, switch off. I have done a workshop with the people and my job is done, right? So we see that. Now what are some of the good practices that you've seen in order to change or manage culture, and maybe let's give it a people angle to it or leadership angle to it, where you said we actually empowered a leader or we empowered some individuals to start driving culture, or we changed this structure. It could be policies and procedures that we changed, or decision making that we changed, or interaction that we changed. So maybe share some examples of where you saw it made a difference to the culture positively.
Well, I can tell you there's got to be a level of openness to it at the
Right.
leadership level. There has to be, or I feel like you're kind of dead in the water, right? First, I think there has to be, I should say, even if I take a step back, I think there has to be an understanding of what culture is and what it's not. Then I think there has to be an openness to say, because you kind of go in with there's a variety of integration strategies and approaches, as you and I both know, right? And a lot of times what I see happens is there's not a formal integration strategy at the beginning, which I have thoughts on. I'm just a fan of having an integration strategy. What are our thoughts at the beginning, even if it's tweaked or nuanced? I kind of come into it with my first question is, what's the deal rationale? And then what's the integration strategy? Those are like my first two questions for every single, right? And so what I find is the deal rationale is pretty clear, pretty clear. The integration strategy is not. And so then what happens is, and I think it goes to what we were saying earlier, how culture can sometimes just not get the attention it needs or the focus. But I think if there is an understanding of what it is and its impact on the integration, in an acquisition scenario, and I think if there's an openness to, actually have your kind of initial due diligence, understand the culture, and then take that information, and have the right communications and the right engagement. Now it depends on how the deal is set up, right? If you close, if you have a signing and close that are not simultaneous, which I have that happen, I will tell you, more often than not, I have a lot of simultaneous signs and closes. And if you had asked me that question 5 years ago, I would have told you I had hardly any, candidly. But now I have a lot. And so what I'm also finding, just on a little bit of a side note, is culture, I think, also gets pushed aside because there's not time. There's not time given to it. They're like, oh, it'll just be handled in integration. But by then the deal, has been inked, and the people are, regardless of what legal entity they're sitting in, they're sitting under the umbrella of the buyer. And then it's a decision then it becomes more or even tactical, to be super honest with you. But I feel like I could talk about that for hours, but but in terms of where I've seen, I'd love to tell you that I have many, many stories of getting cultural integration or integration, including the culture, correct in deals, meaning it's gone well, and all of the efforts have been put in. I can tell you very candidly, very few. It's interesting, even if I think back to that first deal, actually it was the second deal I ever worked on, but it was the first one where I was in charge of like change and communications for the integration. And I got down to the nitty gritty of like, making sure that not only were the communications translated for all of the different people, and I think there were at that time for that deal, I want to say there were like 5 different countries, and they were all in Europe. They had like one person in the US, and then literally everybody else was in Europe. And it was an interesting situation because I got so tactical and I was so fresh to it. I kind of knew what I was doing and didn't know what I was doing all at the same time in this lovely little way. Right. But I knew enough to know that I wanted to try to make, I was, sitting in the US, but I wanted to try to make this a good experience for everybody. So I got very tactical in that even the translation of the documents I had like someone else read to make sure it read correctly. Because even when, and it sounds very tactical and I know that, but I think it goes back to like when you get into those details and you have someone able to have the time, / bandwidth and the mind space to really say, okay, what are we doing here? What are the cultural differences? Do we understand them? What are we able to, are we going to start changing things at close? Are we not changing things at close? And have that full picture. But then also, which I kind of think is the job of kind of that HR M&A lead, is to toggle between strategic and tactical, but also so in this instance, do that tactical work, do the work that needs to get done, understand and try to meet those employees where they are. And that, something as simple as reading the communications, you and I both know, that should be a given, that they read it and they take away. Now, can we control how they exactly interpret it? Of course we cannot. But if I can make it the best possible communications, which leads to then their engagement, which leads to potentially, their motivation to stay, like, I'm not saying that I can exactly correlate it for that deal, but I like to think that it's just like, it's like pulling a string, right? You're
Sure.
pulling a thread, if you will, through due diligence, through the integration planning to get to good. That's what I always say. You want to get to good, and good is, you have people that are engaged. They're nervous because they're always going to be nervous because you're dealing with, hierarchy of needs here, right? You're dealing with Maslow's, do I have a job? Am I going to get paid? Do I have benefits? You're dealing with that kind of a change. So you have to expect some level of resistance, and you have to expect some level of them being nervous. But I think the more that, like, I feel like that integration actually went well.
Sure.
It went well because we were so focused on making it so good for them.
Right. And yeah, I think your people first approach makes sense, because literally, another way of looking at culture is kind of the glue that's between people and the organization structure, right? It's the one that makes it work, and which is why, if you can get very tactical and understand the requirements of people, and that's what empathy is, right? And yet, when people talk about empathy, they often talk about in very fuzzy, warm kind of a feeling, kind of a thing, rather than tactical stuff, saying, will I have a job, right? So empathy does not mean that I'm listening to you properly, but empathy would also mean that I am going with actions that actually means some things, some tangible things that people can look and hear and feel. So that makes sense.
Well, and I think also too, sorry. I think also too, it's just, I think people like to know that that someone's kind of looking out for them and advocating for them. And it's not just here's the change, go.
Yeah.
Right. Like, here's the light switch change, flip the light and go.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't tend to work. Because I remember I had a deal once even where, so this was an interesting deal. It was a carve out, and I was working on the carve out from a divestiture perspective, but I was also working on it from a kind of the build of NewCo perspective. So I was helping NewCo, and NewCo was doing hiring. And so if you're getting hired into this NewCo, you don't necessarily probably know all the background about the deal and whatnot. And the way that the benefits worked, it was almost there was almost a TSA for the benefits.
Right.
And so if that makes sense. Yeah. And so, but what happened is we had this new hire come in to NewCo, had a family, and he had an appointment or some sort of procedure or something that was happening for his family. I don't remember the specific event. And we couldn't get the data feed to work where the information got from kind of like the HRIS to the broker, to the insurance company. And so he couldn't use his insurance, even though we knew it was active. We knew he was good. He had no way to like physically prove it because the insurance couldn't say, oh yes, I have this person in my system. And so I said, after, several days of this, I finally said, can I just talk to him? Because I wanted him to understand that I was working really hard, and I only have, my sphere of control was, only so big, but I was using it to literally the parameters that I could. And so I said, let me talk to him. And so I got on the phone with him. I explained to him. I didn't get into all the tactical. I didn't get into the nitty gritty, but I got into enough to let him know that I was there. I was working for him. I was working as fast as I could. And I was his advocate because he was threatening to leave because he was like, I can't not have, and not have benefits. And so we got it done. but it was almost like wizardry. I don't know how I got it done, candidly, but like I got it done. But like I think that phone call, and then I called him again and said, hey, I was able to get this done. You should know this by X date, you know. And so I think that makes a difference too. And I'm not saying, you know, I know some deals, there are literally thousands of people. There
Sure.
were thousands of people in this deal, but this just happened to be one person,
Mhm.
you know, that happened to be a new hire. However, I do think though, in those instances where you're able and where it's feasible, have that human connection.
Yeah.
Let them know, you know, because that gave him confidence that someone was working on it. He didn't just get another email that said, we're working on it, we'll get back to you. Not that that's bad, but it's not the same as me picking up the phone and calling him. It's
Yeah,
just not.
makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Now let's talk about, you are a senior practitioner. Um, some word of wisdom and advice to people who are getting started in this journey. Imagine HR person who's been asked to take on an M&A integration, first one, like like what you did back in 2010, right? What would you say the do's and don'ts?
Well, I would hope they would have been involved with diligence, but if they were not, which doesn't always happen, you and I both
Right.
know that. But if they're not, the first thing I would say is, um, you know, really be ready, one, to put on different hats, really be ready to think about it, you know, from a kind of organization perspective. Why are they doing the deal? You know, what's that rationale versus what is this going to mean for employees and or contractors? You know, and what is it going to mean also not only for the acquired employees, but the employees at the buyer? Because I feel like that is an area where we don't often spend enough time talking
Right.
about what it's like to absorb, you know, the new employees and work with them and so on and so forth. So start there and understand kind of the why
Mhm.
of the deal, understand the who of the deal, get as much information from diligence as you can. And if you don't feel like you have enough, ask more questions, you know, in the way in which makes sense. But just make sure you're kind of arming yourself with the right data, because and then it's like you get to, okay, well, what does my integration plan look like? And it's funny because I've gotten this question before, from folks that just haven't done deals, and they'll just see that I, you know, on LinkedIn or something, that I have been doing deals for a while, and they're like, can I pick your brain? And I'm like, yes. So I get on the phone with them, and the easiest way that I know how to explain it is, think of it as think of every single group or department within HR. And then how does that play into the deal? So think of it from a benefits perspective. So for integration, are we good on benefits? Are we integrating? Are we waiting? You know, and benefits can be, you and I both know, anything from medical, dental, health, to statutory benefits, to 401k, to any statutory retirement, you know, whatever it is, right? Depending upon which country you're in.
Right.
But think about it from each pillar
Mm.
in HR. So you've got benefits, then you've got comp. Okay, is everybody ready to get paid? Because you
Mm.
have to make sure. Like if there are only two things that you have time to focus on initially, which I'm not a fan of only focusing on two, let me be very clear. But if there are only two, people have to have benefits and they
Yes.
have to get paid. They cannot, I'm going to use a double negative, they cannot not get paid.
Right. Right.
That's just because I've had that happen in a deal where I didn't do diligence and I wasn't working on it, and I came
Mm.
in about 2 weeks before it closed, and it was a nightmare
Mm.
when you have people that don't get paid. And then that's the question of, okay, so if you sit and think of it logically as an HR practitioner, you think, okay, get paid. So do we have all of their compensation lined out? Are they just staying on their same comp? You know, do we have payroll involved? Do they know what they need to be do? Are we good? So it's really thinking about, and I'm kind of thinking a little bit more in the vein of getting ready for close.
Sure.
Now, you know, when you think of post close, you know, or even at close, let's be honest, depending upon when we're doing the change.
Yeah.
Um, so then you think about it from, let's say, talent management perspective, or headcount perspective, depending on which kind of bucket you want to put it in.
Sure.
Does everybody know what they need to be doing? Like, are they going to be doing the same role? Are they going to have the same job title? Are they going to have the same manager? It's really just kind of pulling that thread across around every single pillar in HR to ensure that whether you're getting ready for day one, or you just came in day one and you have to plan the next, you know, 60, 90, 120 to a year or 2 years, whatever it is, that you have answers and you have the data you need for every single pillar in HR, like talent acquisition. Are they allowed to keep hiring? Is there a
Sure.
freeze? It's everything. And it sounds, and I don't mean for it to sound basic,
Sure.
but I really think it can be kind of that. It's foundational. I guess that's how I view it.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, it's that. And then it's, putting the right, project plan together to make sure that not only you understand holistically what's happening, but also all of the people that are working with you from each of those pillars, where you have somebody from TA or somebody from total rewards or whatnot, that they also know what needs to happen, because they're your SMEs,
Sure.
right? They're your subject matter experts.
Correct.
Unless if you're a wizard and you do all those jobs, kudos to you.
Yeah.
But if you have SMEs, then you bring them in the kind of the right format and start to assimilate them into the process, so everybody knows what needs to happen, when it needs to happen by. And honestly, it's just so important, I guess, for that HR M&A person. If you're really new in the career, it's so important to just really kind of leverage your baseline HR knowledge, if you have it,
Yeah.
to use to do an integration.
Gotcha. Now that makes sense. What's the most inspirational moment that you had during your M&A HR career?
That's a very good question. Inspirational moment. Well, I can tell you unequivocally that even like that example that I gave you about helping that individual with getting his benefits, like that was a kind of a monstrosity of a deal, because I had 3 different hats in different phases. Two of the hats were in the same phase, but one of them I kind of had the HR due diligence hat, and then I also had the PM of the payroll migration hat, and then I had the TSA hat, and then I also maybe I had 4 hats, and then I had a lot of hats. And then I had kind of the, the build of NewCo hat. So I was playing a lot of different roles. So it was kind of an exciting deal, but it was also very intense and very complex, just because of how the business was carved out. But inspiration comes for me in the ways of being able to impact that employee experience every day of the week, and twice on Sunday. I will tell you unequivocally. And everything I do impacts the employee experience. As long as I'm in HR doing HR M&A work, that's what I'm here to do, and that's what I love to do, right? And that's where I feel like I gravitate towards. So for me, it's a matter of, when I think about inspiration, it's making sure that individual had benefits. It's making sure that that payroll migration was something. I've never seen 2 systems not work together or play well together in my life, and boy, did they not like each other. And so it was a lot of we take a step forward, and then we take a step back, and then we take a step forward. And the fact that we actually got to the other side of it in a really efficient, effective way still kind of blows my mind a little bit, even though it was many, many years ago. But those are like my little moments of inspiration. Or even when I would do smaller deals, I would go do an info session. I would, fly, and even if it was an asset deal, but we really wanted to retain employees because it mattered. I would do information sessions and telling them all the wonderful things about, the company that I was representing. And they came up to me and they would thank me, for, I don't know, being so comprehensive, or telling them, answering all of my questions, or even afterwards being available for them for additional questions. It's that human connection that I think sometimes gets lost, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it matters that they have a good experience from the moment that they come into knowing about the deal till the moment that they actually, were in integration, and they're experiencing it like real time. Those are like, I have a lot of little moments that I would say of inspiration. Absolutely.
Makes sense. Anything that you would like to take out of your M&A integration calendar, something that you detest, you hate every time you see it?
Something that I don't like for integration? Oh, that's such a good question. Something I don't like. Well, I'll tell you what. I can tell you, integrations, if you actually want to do an integration, like where you properly want to integrate them and get them on, benefits and payroll and all that kind of fun stuff, doing a simultaneous sign and close is not the funnest thing to do on the
Mm-hmm.
planet. Do them? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I understand there's a rationale for them. But that is incredibly, incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So if we could, if I could always just have 2 weeks
Yeah.
for my integration,
Yeah.
I would be the happiest.
Here's the funny thing, because I've been involved with a lot of M&A of the pre-deal side, as well as helping out private equities. What I've seen is there is a moment of time where you know that you're going to buy the company. Okay,
Yep.
so for me, that's a soft date of signing, even though you haven't signed a document, because you
Yeah.
want to sign a document on day one on the same day, right? The change
Yep.
of ownership. But there is a point in time that you come in, or that you come to, where you say, yep, I'm ready to sign.
Yep.
And I think that should be the time when a couple of more people need to be brought under the tent, right? I'm not saying, and that's where the HR guys need to be brought in. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely agree. Couldn't bring HR in as early and as often as humanly possible.
yeah,
That would be one like silver lining. If that is done, I just feel like you're more equipped, to have all the information and really understand and get ready for that integration. But yeah, that it's just integrations are hard to begin with sometimes, just because, like I said, systems don't play well together. Maybe cultures clash or whatnot. And it's for me, it's for integration. I really think if we're able to, if there's not, financial or legal or other reasons that need to have, that require a sign and close, that is my one ask for the universe, is to have a gap. So
brilliant, brilliant. That brings me to my last question before I ask you the favorite books question.
okay.
Imagine you are at Harvard Business School, right? You are the professor of M&A integration, HR, HR M&A integration, right? And there are 300 people who are sitting there in the conference, in the hall, right?
Okay.
What's one piece of advice you would give to them that they should or should not do regarding HR in M&A?
Always care about culture. Never underestimate its importance. Always care about the employee experience. And these are must-haves. These are not nice-to-haves. These are must-haves. And always expect a certain degree of resistance from employees, because this is a change that's happening to them. And they're just finding out about it when you've been living and breathing it for potentially weeks or months. And don't ever forget that. And those would probably be my top three. I probably could have 75,
Sure.
but I won't bore you with 75. But those would be my top three, just at a very 75,000 foot view.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. I think that's well said. What are some of your favorite business books?
So it's a mix, I have to tell you, because I have a degree in organization development. So one of the books we had as a part of that program that I absolutely loved and still love to this day is called, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called Building the Bridge as You Walk on It.
Mm-hmm.
And it's have you heard of it?
Yeah.
It's by Robert Quinn.
Yes.
And it tells all these stories about people who have kind of, I don't know, encountered or embraced change. And then the author kind of takes it one step further, and he develops like a leadership model out of it. And he calls it this kind of fundamental state of leadership. And it's just brilliant. It's brilliant. And I will advocate that for the rest of my life. I love that book.
In fact, I actually also use Robert Quinn and Kim Cameron's competing values model.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that you use that. Oh, I love
that. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Cool. Any book?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Any other book?
The one I'm reading right now is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Mm-hmm. So I'm reading that. So I'm just getting into it. I'm a big fan of it. And the other one that I'm a fan of is What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. I know that's kind of an oldie but a goodie, but I feel like just the phrase alone speaks volumes. And I say it a lot. And so, no, but that book, that book has been kind of significant, and I love it. And I'm a
Yeah,
big
I
fan.
was just looking at my bookshelf right here, and I was trying to see.
Yep. What have you got?
Let's see if I can get
Wait.
some.
Well, guy here won't get. Yes, you got it. I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. Of course you have it.
Yeah, yeah. No, cool, cool. No, this has been really, really good. This has been really good, right? So, well, I guess yeah. I mean, this is literally brings us to the end of the session. Now, before we go,
Yeah.
I would say in your Harvard Business School speech, I would have started and ended it with people first. This
Yes.
was such a pleasure, Lynette. People
Yes.
first is what's going to define our culture in the future. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. And for the listeners and viewers, you know what to do: like, share, subscribe to our channel, and obviously, if you want to get in touch with Lynette, we're going to put her contact details in the description box. So till the next time, here is the promise to a winning culture.
Did you like today's content? If yes, then don't forget to hit the like button. If you heard something interesting, then don't forget to share it with your network and friends. And last but not least, please support us on this journey to spread awareness on topics related to M&A and integration by subscribing to our channel. That's all for now. Stay healthy and see you next time.
And if you like this session, I'm sure you'll also like our latest new tool. It is a quick assessment scorecard to assess the robustness of your culture integration capabilities in M&A. It just takes less than 5 minutes to answer. It is for free and you get instantaneous assessment. So visit culturema.scoreapp.com. That's culturema.scoreapp.com and find out for yourself.